So today I'm working on this ray gun, and the interior of it, I made these rings that spin, which I put the lightning from one ring to another ring, from one ring to another ring inside, and applied that. So moving out. Now I got to put a hand on this, but I wanted to be in tight so you could see the rings kind of moving. I set it to a smaller size so it renders quickly because the lightning does it. So it gives that glow. Now I'm going to need to make a rod of laser coming out the front, probably a glowing red rod that goes from one end and goes out and then kind of collapses. I think the ray gun turned out very well. I'm very happy with it. I put a little detail. Let me go to perspective camera. I copied this arm from Space Mouse. He still has an arm, but I made a copy. And so I'll have it touched to it. So it'll be a close-up of, I was going to raise the gun up, but since I have the camera coming from the spinning laser discs and zooming out, I don't have to raise it up. And then it'll fire. I need to find a Mars image for the background. So the way I put those lasers onto this is in the hypershade, this glass is here, and I can select objects with material by using my right mouse. See how they're selected. And then I can hide this by going to display, hide selection. So then you can get, should have hid the selection. I don't know why it's still, there it is, good. So because it was selected. And so you can see these spinning discs, and each one of these discs has an animation to it. So if I come here and grab one of these discs, like this one, you can see from here to 24 frames, it's rotating. And so I made the disc rotate in different directions by either putting a minus in, and I did 360, this arrow with the line, I can jump to the frame, minus 360. So this would be plus 360. Minus 360 on this one here. And so they're all rotating different directions. But one thing I did with it in the animation editor under Window Animation Editor's Graph Editor, I told it by selecting these frames that I wanted it to, under curves, post-infinity cycle with oscillation. So if we look at that by zooming out, so it's going to rotate and turn the opposite direction. So if we look at this and just play it from here, you can see it goes one way and then it stops and goes the other way. Or just, no, it's not going the other way. It's just slowing down and oscillating. I thought that'd be interesting, but you could make them just cycle so they're just continuously spinning. But I thought this looked like gears and doing a different thing. So I took these and I selected one gear, and then I went to the next gear. I went a few down actually and selected this one with the shift key. And then under effects and effects here, I told it to have lightning. And I didn't adjust the lightning any, I just put lightning in there. And so as it rotates, the lightning will zap and move around the different discs from one disc to another. So the next disc, I went to a back disc, and this disc to this disc and back. I even went from this disc all the way back to the back disc. Unfortunately, the lightning is kind of inside and you don't see it as much. You might see a little bit of a glow after a while, which is okay. I don't need the back end to glow as much. So then I can go display, show all, and it brings back that disc. And then I can move this hand up. Now, when I brought this hand in, it had some animation. I had to go to each part that was moving and delete the animation. And then moving this into position. I rotated it a little bit ahead of time, and I may have to rotate it again because see how that claw is not cooperating. That's the problem with claws. I probably should have had a hand, but that's okay. I'm going to rotate this a little bit this way and then see how it looks on the other side. Now, you may not animate this from where you can see both sides, but I kind of like having it being good for all sides. So if you did want to rotate around the arm and see it from all sides, you could. This claw, I can hit rotates on it. And notice the rotations aren't matching the direction of the claw. So if you double click on the rotate tool, it's going object, and I might try component, and it's not giving me the correct one, and world rotates it, but it's not rotating it correctly, which is interesting to me because I had them all set up so they were correct. And really component should work, but in this case they're messed up and they're not quite right. So you can go D, and if you do D, you should be able to rotate these, but it's being stubborn because you can see there's no rotation there. And normally when you hit D, you can change the rotation on an object. So these are being a little stubborn. And I could try gimbal or custom. And with custom, you should be able to change the axes here, but I want to do it visually rather than trying to set. And D should do this. It should give me the rotation tool with D, but I'm going to try hitting D with the move tool. And it's not giving me a rotation. So it normally does. So I'm going to say File, Save Scene, Continue, and I'm going to open the scene because it's not acting the way I think it should. Ray gun lightning. Sometimes when you get a lot of effects in there, it bogs down the computer a little bit. So I'm reopening this scene. Ask me if I wanted to save. Maybe I said don't save. I may have to go back in and redo the animation on the hands, unfortunately. Let me see. Well, I got one claw moving, and it's moving correctly, and that's my trigger claw. So maybe I'm okay. Happy accident. So from here, let me just move the claw in. And it's all parented, so it's all connected. And I can move the claw in and move it up a bit. And I can zoom in a little bit more. And that looks about right for where the trigger would be. I don't like this other claw here. So what I did is I did rotate this just a little bit like that. And you have to look at this from different dimensions, different lengths. So that looks good for the claw being right about on the trigger. And, oops. So if it's there and it's in the right position, you have to give it a keyframe or else it'll remember where it was. So I did give it a keyframe. And it does look like the trigger's pushing. That's just a happy accident from the last time. So if it's pushing the trigger at this point right here, it's letting go of the trigger. So if I have it selected and I look at my animation, I don't see any keyframes for that. And there should be keyframes, so maybe they're further on. Oh, there it is. There's a keyframe right there. So that's the closed keyframe. And here I don't see an open keyframe, but there's an open keyframe later on. So sometimes with this, you need to give it more frames. Let me move this out of the way up over here. And here I can go to 300, enter, and then make the timeline 300 frames long. And see there's another keyframe there. And that one is the close keyframe. That one's open and this one is close. So I really want the open one to be at the beginning. Copy. Actually, I'm going to say with the right mouse, cut. And I'm going to paste it over here. Paste. Now it takes a while for the camera to get into position for this trigger to work. So I'm going to take this closed keyframe and I'm using these arrows with the lines to jump right to it. I'm going to copy it. Actually, I'll cut it, which gets rid of it. And the camera actually moves into position right here at 72. So that's when I would have the close trigger and then paste it. And that's closed, but the open one, I'll copy it, move my keyframe to it, copy it, and then I want it to pull the trigger right after 72. So we'll see it holding the ray gun, and then it'll pull the trigger pretty quickly. I'll paste it here. And so I'm going from 90, I'll go 98 and paste it. And then, so it'll pull the trigger at 98 to 106. So 98 to 106 is about a half second because we're doing 24 frames per second. So if he squeezes the trigger a half second, it's probably good. And so here at this point right there, I need the trigger, which I'm zooming in perspective view. I'm not in my camera view, and he needs to be moved over a bit so it touches. Can't tell from the angle my camera is, but I like it to be touching in case we want to go around it. And so this one, the pivot's in the right place. I moved the pivot earlier. And so from 98, I can give it a S. And then what was the other keyframe?
116, I think.
116. Yeah, it looks like 116. So that's when the trigger should rotate in. And I'll go S. So if we look at this from the side view, as it pulls in, you can see it looks like the trigger's pulling down. Now, I want to take, so it takes a little while to set these things up, but I want that to be on the trigger more. It was a little bit off of the trigger. The bottom edge of it's almost touching the trigger, but if I move the claw back just a little bit at 0 time, then we can see if it lines up a little better. I'll hit S, set a keyframe. So that's pretty close, but it needs to be to the left just a little bit. Now this is moving in accordance to the object. And if I go to the move settings here and I say world, might be a little easier for me to move this straightly. in a straight way. And so I can move this in. So that should be the tip of the finger on the trigger. And that looks pretty close. Maybe up just a little bit. And do you have to be this perfect? No, not necessarily, but I kind of come from a medical animation thing, and with the medical animations, you had to do them just right for Magnify Group and for Edwards Life Sciences. So I'm going to move it down. They had a thing called Mac 10 where you could actually rotate around. It was like a game, and you could see where all the procedure was happening and really zoom in on it. And if it wasn't touching correctly, then it'd be a problem. So moving it down just a little bit. I think that looks good. I have to hit S to set a keyframe so that hand won't move. And then here, as it comes to the time, it pushes in. And it does look pretty good, other than I think it's pushing in too far. It's crushing into the... Now you can make these things with effects. You can come in, it's not effects, it's, yeah, effects. You can tell these to be solids so they can't go through each other. But I'm just gonna come to this claw and go here. That just takes a little while to set up. And I'm just gonna rotate this claw out. So it's pushing right to there. And I think if I hit S, it's going to look like it squeezes the trigger just fine. And so that's when the laser will happen. So I think that's working well. And here, these other claws, I need them to rotate. And again, they're not rotating correctly. So it was that if you're in the rotate, you should be able to hit D, and then you should be able to rotate this. So let me just look at my settings in the tool settings. Edit post. Edit pivot. Okay, good. Didn't know that was there, but I can edit the pivot and edit pivot. And that shows the pivot, but it doesn't let me rotate it. So reset. Let me try this. I'm going to move this stuff down at the bottom again. And I'm going to say, modify center pivot. So this item, that pivot doesn't look centered to me. And let me see if I can move the pivot here. And so that's putting the pivot about in the right place. But it's not rotated correctly. So let me try this object and then edit pivot. Position orientation object. Can probably use these numbers. World. World's almost correct with this. So it's actually, you should be able to edit the pivot when you're in rotate. You should be able to edit the pivot and rotate it. It's not letting me rotate it. So let me try gimbal. Pretty close with that one. I can move the pivot to there, but it's not rotated the right angle. And you really should be able to rotate it. Try reset. Okay, so I don't know why this is giving me problems, but you see what I can do. If I do E, I can move it this way, and then I can move it this way to keep it in line. I just need it to come down. And this is not really the way you want to do it because you want it to be rotated correctly. But I just need it to come and touch the edge of the ray gun. It's actually not going to be animated. It's really jammed into the butt of the ray gun. Don't like that. See what this one does. So I'm actually rotating on many different angles, which is not, you should be able to pivot the rotation and set it so it's correct. And this, I just want it to touch the handle of the ray gun. So it looks like it's supporting it somewhat. And again, we're not going to see this side, so if it's not perfect, I'm okay with it. And so I think that's going to look okay. I'm going to go Control S and save this, continue. Now, one thing I didn't do is I didn't set keyframes for those, but if they don't have any keyframes, you don't have to set keyframes. So with that one selected, I will at 0 time. See, didn't set the keyframes. Bad, Doug. So if you have any keyframes, you have to set the keyframe again, and I'm doing it at 0 time to make sure this is and it shouldn't be giving me problems, but it is. I'm going to set the keyframe, and there's a motion in here somewhere. So it's got these motions here, which I use the arrow with the line to go to it, and I can just delete these. You can also do it in the graph editor. I mean, delete, and I'll go here, delete. And that should leave that claw unmoving. And then this claw has no motion. So if I'm at 0 time, I should be able to move it. And it's kind of embedded into the side of the ray gun. I don't like that as much, but we'll put it like that, like it's kind of gripping it. And we'll go S. All right, so now if I go to my camera, which I added a new camera. How's it going, AJ?
It's going okay.
All right, good. The camera here, which I normally call render cam. Otherwise, you might render it from the perspective view, and I'm always moving the perspective view. With the middle mouse, I can press on this and move it up to the top where the other cameras are. When I let go, I don't want it to be on top of something because then it'll parent it, but I can put it right here above the ray gun. And so it's not parented, but it's up with the other cameras. Just make it a little easier to find. I'm going to go look through selected. And so this is going to move back, get to this point. The trigger's going to fire, and then we need the laser to do it. Now, I want it to actually stay in here just a little bit so we can see the gears going around. So if I copy this keyframe and I paste it, it'll stay there for at least a second, or 48, it would stay there for 2 seconds, where maybe people wonder, what the heck is that? I think I'll do it more like a second and a half, somewhere in here, 36. So 24 and 12 would be 36, and I'll paste this. So you start doing math in 20. So it's going to stay here with the gears going around, then it's going to zoom out rather quickly. The trigger is going to pull, and then we need a laser coming out of this. So it looks pretty good. I'm going to save this, continue. I may save it as a different name just because sometimes Maya gets a glitch. And let's see what that looks like. So right there, when I render it, and I'm rendering it at the 320 by 240 just because it renders quicker, but gives me an idea of what it looks like. It looks like it's pressing the trigger. The other claws are not visible because they weren't quite lined up as well as I'd like. We have the glow here going on. I think that works, and I think it looks
good.
What's that?
Yeah, it looked good.
Good. So now we have to figure out how we're going to have that laser come out of this once he pulls the trigger. And that trigger was pulled at 116. And sometimes you write these things down. It's a little easier than trying to remember. And so we can have that laser come out of that and go, I would have it zap out and then the end to go this way. So we can make a rod or some other thing like that, and we could add a glow to it or something. So what I'm going to do is with this one, and I'm still lined up wrong in the front view because the laser gun was in the front view. And I'll just make a rod because I think that'll be fine. I'm wondering if the rod being hollow would make it look more interesting if it's hollow and a little transparent. I think it might be. Sometimes that gives you a little more interest. Well, let's try it hollow, yeah. So here with poly modeling, there's under here, there's a tube. Oops, Control Z, I made a jewel. But if you press on these, and you should be able to press on it, get a pipe. And there's a pipe. And if I zoom in on it, we can look at it. And we'll go to perspective view. And so I have this little pipe here, which I'll go W and just move it out. And I think that thickness is probably nice. It has some facets on it. I think if it's transparent, we're not going to notice, but I'm going to click on the pipe in my properties window right here. And I'm going to tell it that I want 40 sides. That's how I made those little discs in there. I went to lower sides. And the pipe in the middle, I made it hexagonal, like a Sharp's rifle. Same thing with here on the top. I made this a hexagon by telling it to have 6 sides. So this one, I can go R and make it larger, taller. And if you wanted to, you could come up here and type in numbers so you don't have to keep dragging it. But I'm going to animate it getting longer anyway. And I have to rotate this on the Z axis, this blue one, like it's a rotisserie, which would be called pitch in an airplane in this case. And so I'm going to rotate the Z 90 degrees. And then I want to position this right in the middle. So if I go to the right view, I can then resize it just a little bit to make it a little smaller. And because I want it to fit maybe about in the middle of this, not this center, but in the middle. And I'll go W. And in the front view, I can line this up so it's right in the right place. Normally try to do things right off the center, but this ray gun was raised up, so it's not quite in the right position for that. Perspective view, let me go here. And so this rod here, if we want it to come out of the ray gun, we could either make it smaller, and then we could W. And in this case, you can't really see the rod very well. So if you go 4, you can see the rod. And if I have it inside the ray gun and it glows, that might be very nice. But I want to hit D, and I want to position this center of pivot back here, hitting D. So if I hit R and resize it, it's going to go out like that. And it's not going to stick out the back end unless I didn't put the pivot exactly at the end. So I'm going to go Control Z and make sure that my pivot is in the front view. And make that pivot. See how it's just a little off? Make it about here. Even it could be about there if you wanted it to be, but there's good. And so then I can animate that growing out the front of the laser. So it can be inside here. And so at the 116, he pulls the trigger, and then this laser should get bigger. So let's go ahead and do that. I've got it here. At 116, I'll give it an S. And then I'll make it grow like that. And then I made it grow. And when I wiggle the timeline, it goes back. So you need to move the timeline first. So how fast should that zap come out? Should it be a whole second? It's a laser. I guess it could be a second or 2 seconds. So 160 and 48 is about 208. That'd be 2 seconds. But I'm going to make the back of it compress. So there it goes to that length. And we'll go S. So as we're watching, it goes here. We're not looking through the camera, but the trigger will be pulled. Boom. And then the laser will go. Oh, I did it from 160, not 116. Silly Doug. So it took a lot of time to warm up. So these keyframes, I can cut this one, move it to 116, paste it. Then I can cut this one right here, cut, and go to 116, and 48 is 150, 60, 160. And does it need to be 160? It could be 161. I'll paste. So now we'll try it one more time. Move the timeline here and watch. So the trigger pulls, boom, the laser comes out. I think it's moving a little slower than I would like.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
So how do we fix that, AJ?
Move up the frames.
Move the frame. So I can go to this one here and I can cut it. I want it to linger for a while, but I want it to come out fast. So we can go to half second. So 116 and 12 is 128. Exactly where I was. Paste it. Now you can make it look like it's slow motion too, especially if the sound went, you know, but we didn't want that. But you can certainly do that. Trigger pulls. That's still a little slow, I think. Now, you have to be on 24 frames per second, and mine may not be set to 24 frames per second. So in your preferences, you can go into your preferences, and on animation, you can look and see what your timeline's set for displaying. It may not be animation, it may be some other one, like settings are rendering, or time slider is set to 24 frames per second. So if this was set to something else, you wouldn't get a realistic feel. Now, this also is, I just think it's a little bit slow. I want the laser to come out faster, so we'll go here. I could speed it up in After Effects too, but it best off getting it correct here. I'll cut this and I'll just move it so it's even quicker. Paste it there. And so pulls the trigger. And he can squeeze the trigger. I'm okay with that being slow. And then the laser comes out. Squeeze the trigger and so that's pretty good. Boom, boom. Now, if you do this in one frame, it's going to look like it appears automatically. You won't see the motion of this coming out. And I want to see the motion. So I think with this one, I'm going to go back and I'm just going to move it just a couple more frames to the right because I do want to see the motion. You can also move this keyframe in the Windows animation editors, graph editor, and mine is down here. And so if you have the thing selected and you zoom out, and this is translating on the, I think that's Z-axis. Let me click off of that there. It's green, it's the Y-axis. So scale on Y. And if we zoom out using the Alt key, you can see these keyframes. And instead of moving it there, I can grab it here and I can marquee it. And then with the arrow tool, there should be an arrow tool here, I can move it. And should be able to move it here and just move it over. And it's being stubborn sometimes. I'm going to have to work on this one a little more, but I will do it here instead in the timeline. Get to the 120. Cut it. And just move it over a couple more. And paste. And I think that's going to look okay. Pulling the trigger, boom. It took a little longer than I thought to come out, but I think it's okay. Maybe I'll just do this, Control Z, go back until it's there. And I thought that was probably better. So sometimes you play with it a little bit. Oops, it's gone, completely gone. I'll go 123 and paste it. It's still on my clipboard. And so, okay, I think that looks good. So once it's been there for a little while, the laser should drop off. And so I want it to pivot from this end. I think I can do this. So it's going to shoot, and then it's going to go, maybe even moves his hand. If I parented his hand to the laser, I didn't do it. But he's going to hold a steady shot here. And so for a couple seconds, for 120, add 20, 48, which would be 168. I'm going to hit S for set the keyframe so it stays there for a while. And I'm going to put some texture on it like water so it bubbles. And I'm going to go R, and then I'm going to go D. And I think I can move the pivot to here and not have a problem. And this is going to be out of the sight of the camera. And from here, in a very quick motion, it can go and set a keyframe. So let's watch this here. So it plays, he pulls the trigger, hard to see. Oops, something's wrong. Pulls the trigger. It's going the wrong way because I set the pivot and I can't do that. So I'm going to undo it. I thought I could move the pivot, but it remembered that it was it remembers the pivot is here now, and so it's not moving correctly. So I'm just going to undo until I get back to here where the pivot's there. So it comes out, and then instead of shrinking it, I'm going to go here, and I'm just going to move it. So that'll work also, and just move it out of the scene. So now he's squeezing the trigger. We'll zoom in a bit. And 2 seconds. Do you think the 2 seconds is too much? I do.
I mean, depends on what you're going for.
I think 2 seconds too much. If he was trying to burn down a door or something with the laser, it might be okay. I think 1 second's probably going to be better. Copy. I'll actually cut this one. Cut. Put it over here so it's more like 1 second. Paste. And then this one here. I'll go to it. Cut. Paste. And we'll look and see what that looks like. So sometimes if you had a storyboard, you could figure it out ahead of time, the timing. And I think it's not quick enough in going away. You could actually have it just disappear. You can actually turn the visibility off at a certain time, or we can make this much quicker. I do want to see it going away, so I guess that's okay. I'll leave it, Control S. So now if I hit 6 and 6, so I can see the textures, this needs to have a nice glowy texture. Now, we could put, they actually have a type, let me do this editor here and go to the hypershade, which is down below somewhere. So I'm not finding my hypershade, so I go up here and I can just reset current workspace. And there's my graph editor. And it put it over here on the side, so the hypershade should show up. There it is. There's fluids and different things here, which I haven't used as much. There's ocean. Ocean would be moving with ripples, and that might work. Let's try ocean on this. And so we'll go ocean. And with the ocean shader, should show up over here. Double click. And we can take the ocean and we'll call it laser. And we'll go into the attributes for this shader. And it has some different colors and things on it. There's a glow, so we could give it a glow and a spectral glow, which might be interesting. We can go into the ocean and we got the scale, but we really want to change the colors. And so ocean shader should have colors with it. Wave height, wave turbulence. So I'm going to close it and I'm going to go here and double click on it one more time. And it should give me colors. Speed, direction, position, unless we want an ocean shot. Common material attributes, there they are. So I want the watercolor to be maybe a reddish orange for the laser, maybe more red. And then the foam could be a more, I don't know, what, yellow? And then we can apply this, and you have to say done here. And so the ocean should be down here. Laser, grab it, we'll apply it to the rod. Oh, that's nice ripples on it. Let's zoom in on it a little bit and see what it looks like. I would like a little more glow on, oh, actually that glows pretty good.
Yeah,
Maybe a little more transparency on it. Here's some transparency. And it has some glow attributes. Let's bump the glow up just a little bit. Speed of the waves, wavelength, wave scale, wave time, wave height, wave turbulence. Maybe we give it a little more foam emission. Let's do that. And I don't know what these do exactly. Bump, blur, let's do that. And let's render this one more time and see what it looks like. So I'm putting special glows on it, and sometimes it takes a little longer to render, and it tends to render the glow at the end. And see, so how this is taking more time. So the more of these special little glows and lightning and things, it takes more processor time. So this is going to take a lot longer to render, though it's a fairly short scene. You can see that this is not not quick at rendering, and it's at the very small size. If I double this size, the 320 to 640, it's going to take 4 times longer to render. And if I go to the 1920, it's probably going to take about 8 times longer to render. So sometimes with these glows and things, you may go, well, maybe it was okay without quite as much glow, without as much lightning. But I do like the effects. So let's see how it looks. And if it looks good, I'll just let my machine run overnight. First time I let it run overnight, it bothered me. I kept worrying about it, but it runs overnight just fine. So I can let it go overnight and render. And you can render, if you're rendering still images, you could render half of it one night and half of it the next night and just start where you left off. But this is taking a little bit of time to render with that glow. I probably put the glow way too high. It's probably coming way out here. But let's see what it does, and we'll go from there. Any questions about this?
No.
These are all the lightnings. I just left them white, but I can double click on them and change their colors. Might be interesting to have a few more different colors inside this chamber before it shoots the laser. Unless the blue is the color that it is, I don't think it is. It's still rendering. So bumping those rendering attributes up. Oh, there it is. It's starting to come. I'll give it a second. So it's taking a little while to render, but I'm happy with the way it looks, and we just need to find a background scene. So maybe I'll go in here and I'll go to Control N, and I don't know that you can see this or not. You might be able to. And I'm doing a Google.
No, I'm just seeing mine.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just going to Google Mars surface. See if I can find a Mars image to put in the background. And I think that would be fun. Put this one in the background. Yeah, it looks like a pretty big one. Let me find it. And I'll say save image as. Where should I save the image to? Source images. Save. Getting out of this, going back to Maya. And I'm going to share Maya. Oh, that looks really very good.
Yeah, I like that.
And the ocean's going to move. So you'll see these ripples moving. It's just going to take a long time to render. So here in this camera view, which I'll go, oops, attribute editors. Let me close that. Let me close the hypershade. I think the laser looks pretty good. And so, especially when it comes out like that and comes across. Okay, I think that's going to work. And in this camera, which I want to go to my camera view, look through selected, it's going to move from here with the spinning gears and electricity. And then it's going to zoom out to here. It's going to pull the trigger, the laser's going to fire, and then it's going to go like that. And I'll probably just take a still image so all the gears stop moving. Or that's all right, they could still be moving. And maybe he drops his arm down. But I think I don't need to do that. I think like that is good. So I think that looks really nice. I think that's going to work well. And we need to take this camera. And if I look at the properties for the camera, which this is big here, let me minimize it and go right here. I don't know why it's so big, but we'll grab it and make it smaller. In the camera, there's an environment. And it's down in here. And you can create an image plane. And on that image plane, or you could render this with alpha channels, so you could put any image behind it you wanted. But I went here and I want to go to my EM light, that's where the ray gun is, and source images, and get the, oh, I could put a volcano behind it, Mars surface behind it. And let's see how that looks when I render it. I might have to load a bigger image because I'm seeing the edges of this image. And we'll let that render. And if it's going to take too long, then we'll not worry about it, and I can send it to you later. One, I let it go, and I'm going to say go back to stop the share. First of all, I'm going to hit escape, and then you can close this.
Is it because of the ocean?
The ocean, but also all the lightning is taking up a lot of render time because it has to generate that and the glow on it. And anything that has a glow takes longer. It could be that in my render settings, ray tracing tends to do reflections and different things. And lights also take time. And so the lightning has some lights in it, and that just ends up rendering time. But if I look at my ray tracing settings, which are in my Maya software, if I turn that off, it might render much quicker. ray tracing does reflections and shadows and things like that, but I think this is going to look okay without it. Let's try rendering it one more time. I'm going to save it first. Continue. And then it's always nice to save before you render because sometimes it crashes when it's rendering. Sometimes, not very often. So yeah, see, turning off the ray tracing certainly made it render very quick. But notice with the transparency on that laser, it doesn't look as good with the background image. But I am getting glows here from the lightning inside and the glow off the back, which I think looks okay. So I might take the transparency out, but if I make the foam a little whiter, so the ray tracing really did give me a lot more interesting looking laser. And we could lower these refractions and reflections and just try it one more time. So it might take a little while to render. Yeah, it's all the reflections and the glows and things like that. Ray tracing really gives a nice look, but sometimes it's not worth it. You notice we didn't get quite the glow, but with the background image, if it's transparent, the background image is going to kill a little bit of the glow. Well, I'll let this render and I can send you a still of it so you see what it looks like.
Yeah,
But
sure.
I'm going to say goodbye.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, you're welcome. So that's the laser gun and laser beam and lightning and things like that.
Yeah,
All
it
right,
came together well.
take care.
All right, bye.